partners, it can be customers, it can be folks within the industry, and most of them just want to understand how they can get more from their threat intelligence. Other questions can be based around, they're receiving a lot of information on different threats, on different threat actors. It can be, related to a particular region or even particular industry. And most of this information maybe can be, disseminated by either security vendors. It can be computer emergency and response centers. Then we have the other likes, the CIRTS, and then as well as different sharing groups. So the main aim for this is for you to be able to understand, if you're either on the red team or you're on the blue team, where you really need to focus your efforts. So in terms of your attention, your time, and also your resources, and also being able to understand which are the most significant threats for your organization. And so also some other questions will be, what is the whole essence of threat attribution? What is the value of you getting to know who is attacking you or who is attacking your organization? So all these are valid questions, and I hope this session will be able to address those particular concerns. A little bit about myself. My name is Moses Mugoty. I'm a pre-sales engineer at Kaspersky. I'm currently, handling pre-sales responsibilities for East and West Africa. In terms of my experience, I have been I have more than 10 years experience in IT domain. I have worked with different system integrators. Through that, I was able to, assist in deploying different IT systems across different corporates. So a little bit, about my journey into cybersecurity. Basically, right before campus, that was the main interaction that I had with computers. Initially, I wanted to study economics, as well as do a bit of learn the foreign languages. So one day when I was, if you're familiar with Allianz, so one day I was going for my classes, then across the road I saw, there was this big billboard by Shangtao. They were offering diploma in media arts, so graphics, 2D, 3D animation, all that. So that really got me interested. Basically, from that point, I started running a cyber cafe while I was pursuing my bachelor's degree in computer science. Basically, that's how my interest in cybersecurity and IT in general came in. So in terms of working, I have worked with several local integrators. So those who are familiar with the likes of 7Cs, among others. In terms of certifications, definitely a lot of experience around routing and switching, IP telephony, CCTV, Wi-Fi, setting up Wi-Fi systems, SIM solutions. I've also worked with checkpoint solutions, so also a good understanding around the different solutions that checkpoint software technologies offers. So I hope basically from this session I'll be able to share a lot in terms of what those different organizations have been able to instill on me. So in terms of our agenda for today, the key topics on our agenda are as listed. So just quick summary of the threat landscape. We aligned some definitions, making sure any confusion that might be there based on something you have read elsewhere. We're able to make sure all that jargon is aligned and we are talking about the same things with respect to cyber threat intelligence. Look at a few sources and types of threat intelligence. Then we look at some threat intelligence services and products that different security vendors are offering, and also we'll talk a bit, the open source intelligence. Then also be able to look at a few, maybe a demo and maybe a few use cases if time will allow. Then we have our Q&A section. So in terms of any questions you have, feel free to post them on the Q&A chat box, where I'll try to be able to address as many as possible. In terms of some complimentary prizes that we have. I think we will be awarding, the most interactive attendees. So they will be getting a prize. So yeah, keep be as interactive as possible. Be engaged. So in terms of the overall trends and threats, I'm sure you've heard this a million times, but it still remains true. The cyber attacks are basically rising year on year. They're becoming more sophisticated. The financial impact for them is growing by the day. And also in terms of the number, we are definitely detecting more and more threats by the day. So for example, our in-house automated systems, as Kaspersky, we are currently detecting up to 360,000 new files per day. So definitely that's a large number, because most of those we need to be able to analyze them to be able to decide if they are new malicious files. But the good thing is that only 1% of those actually need manual work. Most of the other processing is actually fully automated. And then out of that 1%, only a tiny fraction of that will actually, need to be addressed by our security analysts. So those are the guys who form part of our global research and analysis team. So I'm sure if you are into you read a lot about advanced persistent threats, definitely you'll see a lot of publications made by our global research and analysis team. And also, we have some free resources that also you can be able to use. So basically, they are like logbooks of the different chronicles of the APT groups. So you can be able to look at some of those. So let me just quickly show you one of them. That will be APT Secure List. So on that particular resource, you can be able to see a lot of information in terms of the different APT groups. So here you'll be able to get a lot of information. And then also, you can even be able to look at the different advanced persistent threat groups, be able to understand, what they have been up to. So you can see here, the most known APT groups, all that information is here. For any of this, you can just click. You can be able to drill in, find out if they are still active, what are the threats related to them, basically. And one of the sources for threat intelligence that is open. So you can have a look at this later on. So in terms of the threat actors, we all understand the motivations for them will differ. The motivations definitely will vary widely. It can be from things such as blackmail all the way to identity theft. And then also, if you look at the different industries, definitely each industry has its own unique set of data that needs to be protected. It can also have unique applications and different technologies. And basically, this means we have tremendous variability in terms of how the attacks can be executed. And we are seeing newer methods emerging every other day. In terms of recent high-profile breaches, this is a quick slide in terms of some of the technology vendors that have been impacted by different breaches. So the main takeaway from here is that nobody is immune. We are basically all subject to the same reality. We understand compromise is inevitable, but at least there's something we can be able to do, and I hope we can be able to see the value of threat intelligence. If we were to look at the overall threats, and then maybe try and categorize them into a few percentage categories, and then be able to address them based on their severity, you can see here at the bottom, we have 90% of the overall threats. So this one will be your generic threats, so commodity threats. The good thing about these ones is, we are talking about things like spray and pray attacks, and they just require basic defensive mechanisms. So if you have your IT security hygiene in place, you can be able to deal with this. So, endpoint protection does a very good job because most of this can be automated. And here, since most of these are actually known, you can be able to have automated prevention technologies handling this particular category. As we move up the pyramid, you see here we have 9.9% of the overall threats. Here now we are starting to deal with threats that are a bit more sophisticated. Now we are starting to introduce terms such as tools, tactics, and procedures. So we'll be able to see more about this using the meta attack framework. But the idea is, as we move up, they're becoming more sophisticated. Then at the very top, we are talking about 0.1% of the overall threats. Here, our main concern will be APT actors. So definitely, these guys have a lot of time, a lot of resources. Some of them can even be can actually be state-sponsored. So definitely, they have a specific target in mind. They're able to understand the controls that are in place, and they're able to, customize and come up with attack scenarios that can be able to bypass the security controls that are in place. So as you can see, commodity threats, fairly known. As we move, then at the second level, we have tactics, techniques, and procedures, but these ones are known. So what are these? So I'll quickly show you a slide in terms of what is this meta attack framework. So ideally, meta attack framework is a globally accessible knowledge base. So we have all the adversary tactics, techniques, and procedures. Basically just a quick summary, you can see, if you look at the kill chain, we have these different phases. So that will be the tactic. So how do you achieve, maybe for example, lateral movement? So this is the tactic. So how exactly you achieve it will be the technique. So if I click into this, we can go into the details. You can see, okay, this has been studied for a while. We already know the behaviors, and also we know how some of the threat actors have been achieving this particular, making use of this particular technique, this particular tactic. So the actual techniques are as listed here. You can be able to see all the different ones. We can be able to see the exact technique, the details around it. And then we can even be able to drill down further, be able to understand, if it's exploitation of remote services, what that entails. Even you can see some of the, for example, the main APT groups that, for example, have been using that particular technique. So a lot of information. And as you can see, the tactics, techniques are definitely listed and publicly available on the meta attack framework. So moving on APTs, I'll talk about it a bit later on, but at least now we have the idea what we mean when we talk about the tactics, techniques, and procedures. So in summary, looking at the threat landscape and the challenges, the number of threats is growing by the year. They're becoming more and more sophisticated. Some organizations will want to believe, or even some people will want to believe that for you to be a threat actor, you need to be very skilled in programming. But that is actually not entirely true, because right now, you can be able to get the tools. You can be able to buy, tools that are fairly automated to be able to do most of that for you. And even if you have a little more money, you can just, get this to be, you can be able to get this as a service. So things like ransomware as a service, you just pay, you give the details on the target. Then that attack will be executed. Even there's a revenue sharing model in terms of what you get, what the attacker gets. So definitely it's becoming easier and easier by the day. The other concern will be definitely organizations have different security controls, so firewalls and the likes, but most of them you find that they're not integrated. There is no sharing of that information. There's no central management. So again, another concern. So maybe we are seeing a threat on the network. We are seeing something related on the endpoint. So on the network, someone accesses command and control, maybe server, domain, downloads a file on the endpoint. When it's running on the endpoint, we have the details around what that execution entails, but we don't, we are not able to correlate the two. So definitely there are tools around that. Then also the shortage of talent. So globally, some reports were estimating, 3.5 million, a shortage of 3.5 million cybersecurity resources. Then the other challenge will be, since already there's a shortage, identifying those skilled resources, then retaining them is a big concern. So if you can be able to automate most of the prevention and detection, there will be a lot of value, and also it will help us be able to address that particular concern. The other concern will be volume of alerts. So definitely a lot of security controls in place, a lot of volumes being, a lot of alerts being generated, and definitely a lot of false positives. So the estimates, according to some reports, are as shown here. So all these are legitimate concerns, and we need to be able to address this. So after that, we can get into the, let's align some quick definitions to make sure we are on the same page in terms of, what we are talking about. So quick summary. When we talk about threats, I think this is fairly obvious, but if someone is not familiar, it can be malware, it can be specific attacks, it can be, APT groups. So all those will entail. You can check out APT Secure List for more information. When we talk about indicators of compromise, here it's mainly around when, let's say, we have new malware. Let's say we have an endpoint, we have a new file is landing on the endpoint. We need to be able to verify if it's malicious or not. So instead of even waiting for it to actually run on the endpoint, we decide to query the reputation of that file. We query the reputation, we see it's a new file, we don't have the reputation for it from that vendor's cloud-based intelligence. So we say, for that particular file, let's do additional analysis. Maybe the customer has an on-premise sandbox. We send the file to the sandbox. Then when it executes, we are now looking at the actual behavior, anything that is abnormal about it. Then if we deem it to be malicious, we'll have the details. So it's either being done on-premise on the sandbox, or maybe depending on the vendor, you send it to their cloud, they do the analysis. At the end of the day, if it's malicious, they'll be able to get the signature for it, which is basically the hash for it. Then all the other details, the vulnerabilities, if it's trying to exploit specific vulnerabilities, trying to connect to specific IP addresses that are malicious, all those will be the indicators that are related to that particular malware, and then those are now becoming our indicators of compromise. So in one of the demos, I'll show you, for example, how endpoint detection and response can, generate this for you internally. Then indicators of attack. Here, like I said, we saw the tools, the tactics and procedures. So ideally here, for example, if the main idea here is we want to be able to understand, the series of actions that an attacker must conduct in order to be able to succeed. So once we understand that, we can be able to use machine learning technologies and be able to apply, use those particular detection engines to monitor for similar activity. Then you can be able to flag it. So we went through this. I'll prefer not to spend more time on this, but I can always address this in the Q&A section if it was not clear to a few. Then if you look at the threat models, so threat models, mainly we're interested in, the systemic processes whereby we need to be able to use to either identify potential threats. And then once we identify them, we can be able to proceed to enumerate them. And then based on that, we can be able to come up with mitigations and be able to prioritize those particular mitigations. So there are a lot of threat models. The most common one is this one. So the Lockheed Martin's cyber kill chain. So we have these 7 phases assumed to be sequential, but definitely there are other models. We have the diamond model, whereby also we have, the meta attack framework. The most important takeaway here is that for all these stages, you need some form of intelligence. So either you're trying to understand the target, then once you understand the target, you need to understand their weaknesses, then you will be able to proceed to exploit. So even at the exploitation, you understand what they have in place, you understand the vulnerabilities for that, you understand the channels that are available for you to be able to deliver the malware, then you can be able. So basically, threat intelligence will be applied entirely. And for those who have done, the likes of ethical hacking, I think that, really, you have been able to apply already these different forms of threat intelligence. If we look at the internet, it's important to note, there are several layers. We have the surface web. So this one is the indexed portion. And this is what most will interact with, because you're using a browser. The browser mainly is able to, handle this indexed section of the World Wide Web. Then as we move down, you can see we have the deep web, and then we have the dark web. So generally what has been identified is that, if you're looking for threat intelligence, ideally the newest and the most valuable one will tend to be found on the real dark web. And then we'll talk a bit about the forums there, what we do there, and how that will be able to help the organization to be a bit more proactive and remain a step ahead of the attackers. So I'll not spend a lot of time on this. So for intelligence, let's quickly make sure we are talking about the same thing. So for intelligence, intelligence can mean different things to me. It can mean, many different things to different people. Already, if you look at the, general definitions around intelligence on its own, you can see definitely there are various definitions. There are different things that, the emphasis is being put on different items. But what I want us to take away from here is that secrecy is key, and it's also a good. So secrecy is key, and it's also a good element to have in your threat intelligence. Even despite that the fact that open threat open sources of intelligence are also becoming increasingly important. Secrecy is important because it can be secrecy in terms of the process, the actual process of getting that threat intelligence, or it can be related to the actual information, so the actual threat intelligence insights. So for example, if we have a blog, the blog is being, if we have a blog and then the blog is being used, describes a particular threat actor, then the actual TTPs that were related to a particular breach, even the threat actors, they're also monitoring the internet for similar information. So if they notice that, that particular approach has been identified, it will give them, an opportunity to be able to modify accordingly. So secrecy is important, and that's where, the value of commercial threat intelligence starts to come in. Then the other thing will be gaps. So I think we all understand, there's nothing that is 100% in security. So with respect to gaps, the assumption here is that there's no 100% accuracy. Since always there will be an aspect of gaps that will be introduced, whereby based on the way you're collecting, basically based on your sources of the threat intelligence, you'll have a blind eye to a particular maybe region or a particular vertical. Yes, so based on that, definitely we understand there will be a gap because, depending on the coverage of maybe that particular vendor or the sources that you're using, there will be some areas that are not covered, and basically it will introduce some form of bias in terms of the threat intelligence that you have. So basically, in summary, it boils down to assessing and being able to contextualize the gathered information, and then being able to produce assessment of a particular issue, a particular challenge that will be able to support decision making. So if we now apply this to cyber threat intelligence, here mainly we are focusing on understanding, assessing the capabilities, the intentions, and also the activities of threat actors. So basically our foreign adversaries. And basically we need to be able to do this so that we can be able to protect our computer environment. So in compared to the, definitely cyber threat intelligence is very tech focused, and it's influenced a lot in terms of, there are a lot of external factors that influence it. And when we get to the types of cyber threat intelligence, we'll be able to see how that applies. So in summary, Gartner, according to them, threat intelligence is basically evidence-based knowledge, including the context, mechanisms, indicators, implications, action-oriented advice about an existing or managing menace or hazard to assets. So you can see that at the end of the day, we need to be able to have intelligence that actually, guides decision making, meaning it's basically actionable. So if we look generally at the intelligence cycle, there are specific processes that need the raw data needs to go through before it's actually available. Basically, before you can be able to generate insights from it and then be able to disseminate it to the general public. So this will be the basic approach, how most security vendors will approach threat intelligence. The steps can vary, some can be compressed, some can be, again, broken down into further steps. But generally, this is a good guide in terms of the intelligence intelligence cycle. So in terms of, we start at the data. So this will be the raw data. So raw data is basically something that is individual. It's a fact and it's not arguable. So for example, it can be just a simple statement. So data can be, we have an individual connection, individual connection that has been initiated. That's it. It's basically that. It's just a fact. There's really nothing much more to it. But once we start, we can be able to process it into information. So here it's more of we get several data points, then we can be able to combine them, and then it can be able to now actually help us to answer a simple question. So simple statement. Now here we are combining this, we are being able to answer a simple question. Then we are now progressing to intelligence. So here it's mainly us, we want to be able to interrogate. We want to be able to interrogate the information and be able to draw insights from it. And then based on that, the insights should actually be actionable. So they should actually drive some form of decision making. So actionable intelligence. So that's the end. So that will be the progression. In terms of this process in general, the main idea here is we need to be able to understand from the beginning, what is the main concern? So what are the threats that are interested us? What are we exactly looking to achieve by being able to come up with that particular form of intelligence? So what are the threats that we are looking to address? Based on that, this particular engagement, we want the threat intelligence to be able to address what particular aspects. So being able to come up with the requirements, they should be very clear. Then once from there, we'll be able to move into collection. Then definitely once we do this, we do the collection, we need to be able to do extensive aggregation of the data that has been collected. So definitely a lot of inspection, a lot of refining. Basically, we are doing a lot of we are using basically a lot of multiple pre-processing techniques. So here things like statistical criteria, sandboxes, it can be things like heuristic engines, similarity tools, you can even do behavior profiling. So we are basically just, analyzing that particular data. This is important because that data needs to be, the data and the information needs to be extensively analyzed, because at the end of the day, we are using this to inform different decisions. If this process is not right, it means that at the end of the day, you'll end up with intelligence, but that intelligence will have a lot of false positives. So it will basically be misleading, and false, intelligence that has a lot of false positive is basically valueless. And at the end of the day, it will just end up wasting the time, the efforts of the InfoSec team, and it will just expose the organization to threats because, it's not well analyzed, and that will be a weakness. So also at this point, it will be good to just state, definitely there's a huge difference between intelligence generation and intelligence consumption. So basically intelligence generation means that you at least collect. So it can be internal sources you're collecting from, or maybe external ones, and then you collect and exploit. So in turn, we'll be able to look at this, but ideally, for collection, you just have sensors. Sensors can be in the form of security controls, and we'll be able to see some of this. Intelligence consumption means we are just using intelligence that has been generated externally, maybe from a security vendor. External sources, important because at the end of the day, with external, basically, like I said on the previous slide, it means that you're just consuming intelligence. So it can be, for example, from vendors. Like I said, based on the coverage of that particular security vendor, if maybe they are not covering a particular region, not covering a particular vertical, maybe, for example, they are not covering telecom, it means that they'll not be able to have insights into what is happening there. So that will introduce a gap in terms of the intelligence that you have. So this is important in terms of the threat data feeds. I'll be showing you a bit more on this. Then the other sources will be intelligence. We have intelligence and criminal reports. We have different corporate sharing groups. Definitely, I can say we've not been, the local corporates have not been doing a good job. More can be done in terms of being able to share insights into the different threats they encounter, and being able to help other similar organizations be able to prevent such. So definitely there's a lot happening in this space. Then also we have print media, social media. We have a lot of public sandboxes that I'm sure most of you are already using. Then we have the dark web. So a quick so here you can be able to see some of the tools. So I'll not get into the details of this, but ideally, you can be able to go on these different links, try out these different sandboxes. Even if it's URLs, we have URL scan.io. You can still be able to use it to investigate what you are detecting in your environment. Internal sources, the most common ones are as listed. So security control logs, network device logs, application logs, AD logs, DNS logs, operating system logs. So these are very effective, especially for post compromise, and also in some instances you can actually be able to detect an attacker while they're actually live on your network. So for example, security control, the logs are important. So for example, let's say already we have a threat actor has been able to compromise the organization. Now they are doing a bit of lateral movement, and then they're making use of the likes of email phishing. So internal email phishing attacks, but you've only applied security. For example, you only have perimeter firewall, so perimeter security control. So internal traffic, mail traffic, maybe even internal traffic between applications and the different users within the environment, you're not monitoring that. So definitely that is a gap. And it means that if these are your particular sources, or you're just using specific sources that do not have good coverage, again, you have a gap. And you have blind spots that can be exploited. So the other thing here to mention will be a SIEM. SIEM is a good solution because ideally it will help you to be able to store, normalize, aggregate different logs. Depending on the solution, on the SIEM solution, you can even be able to integrate with with threat intelligence from different sources. And basically, it will be able to help you be able to do, especially retrospective analysis. So something happened in the past, we have the logs. Then, like we said, we have IOAs, we have the indicators of compromise, indicators of attack. You can even be able to query across that particular repository. There are tools that can be able to assist you to do that automatically. You can even be able to now integrate with external sources, so the likes of threat data feeds. There are several options to automate such analysis. So in summary, in terms of Kaspersky, definitely we also make use of both of all those sources. So we do have actually our data in terms of the aggregated statistical threat intelligence data. It's pretty huge. So we are talking about more than 20 years in the business. So definitely a lot. And the other good thing for us is also around this security network. So ideally, Kaspersky users globally, they can be able to decide if they want to participate in this security network, whereby they can be able to share the personalized data, for example, from the threats being detected here. So definitely there's that global coverage, because we're talking about more than 213 countries. So definitely good coverage, being able to address that aspect of the blind spots and the gaps in terms of regions not being covered. Then additionally, we have all these other sources. I'll not go through them, but I'm sure you get the point. And also you can see here, the deep and the dark web are also included here. So definitely good coverage, a lot of analysis, both automated, as well as having experts. So human analysts also, making sure that, we have very accurate threat intelligence before we disseminate it to the general public. And then definitely there's that loop, like we saw, a lot of feedback being offered by the users on how to be able to further improve those particular sources, that particular threat intelligence. If we look at the threat intelligence types, generally 3 categories. So it's either tactical, operational, or strategic. In some areas, you'll find that some of this can be broken down further. Maybe you can have something like technical threat intelligence. But in the general sense, we mainly have we'll mainly focus on these 3 ones. So the technical, this will be the easiest to generate. It's also very readily available, especially on the open sources. So like I said, we talked about the IOCs, indicators of compromise. Most of them will fall under this tactical. The other takeaway here should be that indicators of compromise, we are talking about IPs, URLs, file hashes, domains. These are very machine readable. And they can be easily ingested into your security controls. So if it's your firewall, your SIEM, and the likes. Also, you can be able to use APIs for you to be able to now consume this. So those can be consumed, for example, in the form of threat data feeds. So a data feed will be a combination of that. So it can be a threat data feed on IP addresses or malicious URLs or file hashes. So you can be able to subscribe to the one required. So it will be an additional threat intelligence that is being consumed by whichever security product that you have. It's important here to note that these ones technically have a very short lifespan because those objects easily become obsolete. It can be in a matter of it can be in a matter of hours, or even after a certain period, in a matter of days. So here, the most important thing here is that these feeds must be delivered in a timely fashion. And also they must have, they must be very accurate. So a lot must be highly, we need high fidelity for them, so as to make sure we reduce the false positive. Because if it's timely and then I'm getting this after that particular IP address, that domain has been neutralized, you're now, basically misguiding the team in terms of what they need to focus on. Then operationally here, it's more of adversary oriented. So here it will be more of technical details. So we want to know who is attacking us, why they're attacking us, and how they're attacking us. So clearly you can see how the tactics, techniques, and procedures for the threat actors are coming into this. So very technical. The main consumers for here will be, SOC, incident response, vulnerability managers, also anyone handling threat monitoring. These ones have a fairly longer lifespan as compared to tactical, because here you see it's more of the tactic, like we saw lateral movement, for example. Then the technique can be, exploiting RDP. So you can see that those are fairly harder for the threat actors to change. So that's why they have a longer lifespan. For example, if it's a specific malware type that the threat actor is using, or maybe it's specific infrastructure that they have set up, it's very hard for them to change. So definitely, that's also good in terms of being able to rely on this. Then for the strategic, this one is mainly, being able to use threat intelligence to inform decisions. Here it's more of understanding the big picture. So we just want to understand this threat. Maybe it's a threat actor group. So basically, for example, an APT group. So we just need to understand this is the APT group. What is actually motivating them? What are the geopolitical and even the economical situations in their countries? So again, the understanding here is that no threat actor will live in a vacuum. So all those political and economic situations for their countries will influence them, will influence their operations, and this we can be able to infer this and be able to use this to understand this in detail. Yes, so mainly we can be able to have this. So if you look at the actual, the mapping of the different forms of threat intelligence to these particular groupings, I think there's one more that will be added, technical. For this case, I will be definitely showing you in terms of Kaspersky threat intelligence. So maybe some of you will ask, why Kaspersky threat intelligence? I think I'll just use this to fairly, at least, fairly justify. In terms of external threat intelligence, there are a lot of third parties that do assess these different solutions, and they're able to categorize this. So this is the latest one I could get for Forester Wave, and then basically you can be able to see for external threat intelligence sources, definitely Kaspersky is among the leaders. So that does give a bit of justification as to why Kaspersky and why Kaspersky is talking about this threat intelligence. So if you read the reports, you'll be able to see, in terms of that intelligence cycle that I talked about, when they're assessing this, they're looking at a lot of that. So being able to look at how the collection, dissemination, the channels for client and stakeholder feedback, all that. Also in terms of the, the strategy for that particular vendor, what's their vision, what's their roadmap, what's their market presence. So all this do inform these particular kinds of reports. So if we go back to what we had started on, here the types of cyber threat intelligence, you can be able to quickly see that, this is a quick mapping. You can be able to see the different ones. So instead of me reading the slides, I think what we can do, we can quickly get into the demo. So for the demo, I'll just show you what the threat intelligence portal looks like, and then we can be able to see these different items. So let me just quickly see if there's a question I can answer now. So what are the attacks locally in for East Africa? Okay, could you explain the difference between deep and dark web? Is Tor used to access both? Is there? Okay, I'm not sure about the last one. Okay, I'll try and address those as I proceed. So, but generally here, you can be able to see, we talked about technical, operational, strategic. Actually, technical is what has been added, but you can see it's fairly a branch of, tactical, because you can see the TTPs are here, the IOCs are here. So we'll be able to look at these different items. So for the quick demo, let me just quickly show you what the threat intelligence portal looks like. So any feedback so far? Are we moving too fast? Are we okay? Are we tired? Do I need to summarize?
We're actually looking forward to the demo. It's really interesting.
Okay. Okay. So let's use this. So this one I already showed you. I'm sure you saw a slide on this. You'll be able to look at what Communication Authority of Kenya is doing in terms of incident response, being able to do all this. Open source intelligence, this was under when I was talking about external sources of threat intelligence. This can be a good utility. So if you want to go the open source way, open source intelligence framework. So as you can see here, you can be able to, basically based on what you want to look at, what you want to look for, you can just be able to come here, click on this, Then it can be able to break it down to further categories, but at the end of the day, you'll be able to find the actual utilities that can be able to help you do search on that particular item. So for example, put in an IP address here, put a domain here, get the details around it. If we are looking for something around different archives, so if it's data leaks, you just get here. You can be able to look at the different open repositories of search. And then from these ones, you can be able to further drill down. So very easy for you, instead of you needing to know the exact, URLs, the exact websites that are hosting these different categories. So very good, very easy for you, especially those in ethical hacking, and also those in blue teaming, being able to do additional analysis using the open sources. Then we get into, I'll not touch on secure list for now. So let's quickly get into threat intelligence portal. So one of the questions there was, what are the top threats for example, for a particular country? So this is threat intelligence portal, Kaspersky threat intelligence portal. Basically, it's our hub for all that, that knowledge that we have. And then there are different ways for us to be able to consume it. Quick summary, you can see different sources. We bring it all up. So for example, threat intelligence, the central hub, it has different services around what we saw as the services available under threat intelligence. And so for now, what we do, let's start with this. So if a customer, so this is the commercial version. So if a customer has subscribed to this particular service, you can see under here, we have a lot of services. So I'll be able to touch on them. So the first one was a question around, for example, Kenya, what are the top threats that we should be looking at? So for example, here you can see that I can quickly drill down. Then based on this, you can be able to see the top threats. If it's MD5 hashes for the top threats, they are there. If it's top URLs related to the threats, top command and control, information around that, you can see all that is readily available. For any of this, you just click and you can be able to drill down further. I'm avoiding this because it will take me to another utility that I'll also talk about. So I'll get to this one later. Sorry for this. Let's get in again. So this one is not open. It's only that I had already authenticated. So that's why I'm just accessing it directly. But ideally, our customers just pay for the service, decide on the actual service, the actual threat intelligence service that is required. Then based on that, they can be able to log in. For some services, they are limited. The limitation can be in terms of the number of searches you can do in a day. So you can just have you can have one account for the InfoSec team, then they can be able to access it and make use of it. They just need to keep in mind that daily limit based on the bundle they take. So here, Kenya, quick summary, these details. Like we said, indicators of compromise, you can see. This is an indicator of compromise. I think we talked a bit about how we come up with this. We'll be able to see more about it on the EDR. Then for any of these threats, we can even be able to understand the dynamics around it. So we can also be able to understand, for example, the trends around that particular service. Sorry. Yes, we can be able to understand the trends around that particular service. So that particular threat. Then if you go down here, we can see for the different threats, you can be able to select on any. And if it's, for example, it's related to any of the reports that we have, so it can be...
Excuse me, Moses, let me just stop you. You forgot to share your screen. after you.
Let me check. Sorry. Apologies for that. Let's see. Oh, OSMAP. Okay. Okay, I'll just rejoin on the laptop. Just a minute. Okay, I can see I'm back. Let me share my screen. You can be able to see the screen.
Yes.
Okay, so apologies for that. Let's go back. Where were we? Yes, I think we are somewhere here. So you can be able to drill down per country. You can see the details around that particular threat. For any of these threats, just click and you'll be able to get more insights into it. So it's a Trojan. You can be able to see the main platforms it's targeting, geographical distribution. So you can get a quick heat map in terms of the main countries that that particular threat has been identified or yes, has been identified in. So very easy to use. Okay, so very easy for us to use that. And then the next thing will be the threat lookup. So under here, you can see we have threat lookup. Threat lookup basically means you can't be able to search for anything. So it can be an indicator of compromise. So maybe you are working, something has been flagged by your endpoint or your EDR as malicious. You can be able to input that here. So you can be able to input, it can be a hash, it can be IP, anything here. And then you'll be able to get the details around it. So for example, let's look at this one. So for example, this one, so I was trying to understand this particular hash that had been flagged by, for example, my endpoint protection. So I can see immediately the reputation is this has been categorized as malware. So here we are just building context. We need to understand, okay, it's malware. So is there more to it? So a good use case for this will be, let's say you are using endpoint detection and response. So you have endpoint protection plus endpoint detection and response. Then you have, some of those machine learning-based detections that maybe look at, handle behavior detection. So you say if something is being identified by that, I can say that is fairly an evasive threat. So for that evasive threat, we need to be able to do additional analysis. So maybe endpoint protection, anti-malware detected this. So this is where you start at. Then once you have this, you can be able to get more details around it. So the number of times, we've had hits on it. The first time we saw it, the last time we saw it. Is it signed? Is it a signed application or not? Is it a packed package or not? Then the heat map, quickly you can see where we have detected that particular resource globally. Then the statistics in terms of activity of that particular file based on those detections. And then if it's malware, and then we have other families or maybe other variants that are related to it, we are getting all that information. So you started here, we started with this malware, we started with a malware, this was the MD5 for it, but now, we are building context, you're getting to understand what else is related to it. So I think, I hope based on this, you're already seeing the value in terms of why threat intelligence is important and how it can be able to help you deal, especially with the evasive threats as well as the targeted ones. So here you can even see, if we extrapolate further, we see, okay, this is a threat. Maybe based on sandboxing, based on additional analysis, we have seen that at times you will see it connecting to these particular URLs, these particular domains. So again, additional indicators, if they were malicious, you will want to look, for example, from the logs on your firewall, if you are detecting this, or if you have a SIM, you just want to see any connections being initiated and the destination is related to this particular threat. So can be able to easily use one incident and then be able to build context. So the other services, things like Whois. So Whois is basically, I'm looking at the logs on the firewall. I'm seeing someone was trying to probe the open ports on my firewall. I can see the source IP address, maybe the public IP address. Then I can be able to work from that, get a bit more information in terms of that IP address. It's assigned to who, is assigned to which service internet service provider. Those details can, you can start to be able to, you can be able to use search to be able to do additional analysis. If it's a file you've identified to be malicious internally, when it's running, you see it trying to connect to a particular domain, input the domain here, get more details around that particular domain. So definitely there are other considerations. Maybe the threat actor is, resourceful. Maybe they've even come up with, a way of proxying the request across different proxy servers. Again, a possibility, but we'll be able to at least be able to understand who we are dealing with, the kind of capabilities they have, and then based on that, we can be able to respond accordingly. The other things will be things like who is hunting. Again, similar to that. The only good thing about this is now, since we want to do hunting, we can say this is the domain, this is the public IP address of interest. I actually want to track it. So any changes that will be made to that particular entry, I want to be able to get notifications. So if this is, there's that persistent, source, IP source domain that has been, that is being flagged on your different controls, you can even track them. You can be able to track this and then be able to get details around any changes in terms of those particular resources. The other service will be Sandbox. So I did mention about the other services. We saw these various total, any run, and the likes. Also for our customers, they'll be able to make use of this. Ideally, the files they want to run, we have a lot of those anti-evasion techniques here. We make sure the file will run on that particular environment. So I'll just show a slide in terms of some of the details we expect once we run that file on that environment. So once it runs, we expect to be able to get all these details. So this can either become now, can either be indicators of compromise. Some of them can actually be mapped, for example, to the tools, tactics, and procedures that we saw under the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Again, very important, because at the end of the day, the threat actors will just be, anything that we have seen in the past across the different threat actors, it's documented, and we can be able to extrapolate information from that to be able to even look at basic behavior and then be able to try and determine the intent. And then based on that, we can be able to, for example, detect those evasive and those targeted attacks. So let me quickly do use case. Let's do EDR. So a quick use case using EDR. So you have endpoint protection. Maybe you have been convinced and you have your EDR. So endpoint protection, EDR. So for ease of understanding, we can say endpoint protection is handling, being able to deal with, automatically being able to deal with prevention and detection of anything we know. It also has some of those behavior-based engines. They can be able to address some of the threats based on the tools, tactics, and procedures that are known. And then based on, for this particular case, we assume we have an endpoint. It has all those capabilities. So we want to be able to see how this can be able to help you in terms of your incident handling process. So just a basic one, we have 6 steps. So you've already done your preparation. The environment is done, is set. You have the right policies in place. You have your endpoint protection and EDR well configured. So we want to be able to see how we can progress across this and how we can be able to use at least some of this, how we can be able to use threat intelligence in general to make this very easy for us. So the first step, you've done this, everything. So endpoint protection detects something malicious. Maybe it's detected by those modules that target those particular evasive threats. So based on that, you go to your reports, you have your incident. So for example, here, just a quick one, you can see that we have the parent process, we have the child processes here. So based on this, we can say, for example, this one, you can see here that this is the incident card. We can see the details around that particular endpoint. You can see it's Windows 10, the IP addressing is there, the host name, the user that is logged in. You can see the user is running as a privileged user. The details around that process, the process ID, all those details are basically here. Then we see there was a decision. The decision was basically to block this particular file. So we need to be able to do additional analysis to decide is this malicious or not. So for example, based on this, we want to do an analysis of this. So I need to quickly know, does the vendor I use have information on this particular file? So what will quickly happen is that, for example, just click on this. It will be able to launch for you this separate window. The window has the details around this particular file, the path you can see. Then we have here the hash for that particular file. These are very unique for that particular file. So if you click on this file, for example, we click on the hash for this particular file. It will be able to open for us, for example, the threat intelligence portal. So, for example, it can be either the free version of our threat intelligence portal, which is this one. Yes, which is this one. So we have this one, open tip. So similar to Virus Total, you can just be able to do some analysis using this. The lookup is here. So we have the file, we have the hash. If it was the live environment, you click on the hash, automatically it will take you here, and then you'll be able to see the context around that particular threat. So similar to the exercise that we did the first time, you'll see the number of hits we have on that particular, the reputation of that particular file hash. If it's malicious, all those other details will be there. And so we are just, based on that, we've been able to quickly decide this is a threat. I've validated it against a trusted threat intelligence source, and I've decided it's something that requires your attention. So immediately you can be able to now initiate the actions under EDR. So if you want to isolate that particular host, you can be able to do all that. So let me go back one step to here. So we've identified, we validated that that is actually a threat, so it needs our attention. Immediately we've said we need to contain the threat, so we don't want it to spread, so we isolate that particular endpoint or that particular host. We can even say we want to prevent execution of that file. So if any other file across the environment matches that, we say, we don't even want that file to run. So we are using one instance, and then we are making sure that we prevent it from running across the entire environment. And then we can be able to do things like eradication. So eradication here, we want to delete any copies of that particular file. We want to maybe quarantine the file, maybe if we want to do additional analysis, or maybe we want to do additional analysis and there is a possibility we might need to restore the file. You can be able to do the quarantine. We can even say we want to be able to even do additional analysis across the environment to see if we have any traces of that. So here the important thing will be when this file was running, as you can see here, this file in blue, it was running. You can see some files, what those attempts to download some files, or maybe actually the files were actually downloaded. So file drops, we can see some injections, we can see some network connections that were initiated when this was running. We can even see the registry changes. So all these are basically now your indicators of compromise. So incident happened, the details around that particular incident become indicators of compromise. So this will be one scenario. And then based on this, everything here that has been identified, actually, you can just use that threat lookup service, and then you get the reputation. Even if it's this IP address, the domains, you can be able to, get the context around any of these objects. So again, very important, saving you, because you said alert fatigue is a big concern. Then we have limited teams. So we just need to be able to quickly decide what is important. And then you should be able to focus on that. So that will be the most basic use case that can be applied by basically anyone. So maybe the last one will be, we have a SIEM. So let's say you have a SIEM solution. So let's quickly understand what are data feeds. So data feeds, basically it can be a combination of different indicators of compromise. So the categorization can be different. So you can be able to decide you want any of this. So it can be based on IPs. So you want just information on malicious IPs, URLs, ransomware. So all this, they can be packaged in terms of feeds. And you can be able to consume this because they come in the most common formats. So if you have whatever security control you have in place, it can even be, let's say for my case, maybe you're not even using Kaspersky, you're just using what, let's say Checkpoint, let's say Fortinet firewall. So you want to consume this, or maybe even a Splunk SIEM. So you want to consume these particular feeds to improve the detection of those particular threats. So this one can be packaged, for example, JSON. It can, the most common format will be JSON. We have sticks, we have OpenIOC, and these are basically very, very easy for you to integrate out of the box. And immediately, you can be able to start matching what is being detected on those security controls against this, and anything malicious will be identified. So definitely this is helping you to automate the initial triage. Because it's basically providing you, a triage specialist with enough context for you to be able to basically immediately determine the context and decide if it requires investigation or you just need to escalate, for example, to the incident response team. So very valuable, very easy to integrate. You don't need to be, you can be able to use any threat data feed. So that will be another use case. The other one will be, let's say, for example, you have a SIEM solution. It's aggregating a lot of logs across your network. So you want to get more value from this. So maybe you have your log sources sending information to the SIEM. So now you want to be able to detect any objects here that are related to threats, and then you want to be able to do something about it. So the main reason, so the first one we saw, we can just directly integrate the data feeds. The other option, you can see basically you can just integrate the data feeds across all these different security controls. But this second option is, let's say you have your SIEM, you say you don't want to tax the processes, the resources on that particular SIEM solution. So you want something that is fairly flexible, easy to integrate. And then also you want something that probably has a better passing of the events. So in terms of the engine that is in use for that particular, yes. So you want to use maybe an engine that can be able to easily understand different forms of data feeds, consume them, match them against whatever is on your SIM, and then you see what is important to you. So this will be an approach. So you just have this integrating with your SIM, forward the events to this, then the detections that are made based on the different, it can actually be multiple threat data feeds that go all integrated here, we match, and then we basically tell you what is important, what needs to be addressed. So very easy to integrate, a lot of value, you don't introduce additional load to your SIM, and you can be able to immediately get value from threat data feeds. Ideally, the idea here is that also threat data feeds are not cheap. There are a lot of them. So you also need to be able to understand which threat data feeds actually are most important, apply to you. So like here you can see, you can have a vendor, you can have different commercial ones, you can even have open source and as well as custom feeds being integrated and being matched against what you have in your SIM. So ideally you want to be able to have something that can be able to show you which ones are the most accurate ones, which one are actually giving you the most detections based on what you have in your environment. So it will basically save you money, being able to understand, which threat data feeds are most applicable to you, and then you just subscribe to those. So the last exercise, threat profiling. So here the idea is to help you be able to come up with a way to be able to identify what threats your organization can be susceptible to, and then how you can be able to go about it. So for you to be able to do threat profiling, there are some common questions that come up. So one of them will be, there are too many threat actors. So where do you need to focus your efforts and your resources on? And the main response here will be definitely it depends. And threat profiling is actually a great starting point for you to be able to know yourself, know your enemies, know your enemy, basically your adversaries. And with respect to a threat or threat actors, it's basically we understand they have the capabilities, they have the intent, and given the opportunity, they will definitely cause you harm. So you need to be able to understand who those might be and then be able to address. So the simplest methodology we can use for this, basically define your industry. So which industry are you in? Are you in financial services? Are you in insurance? Are you a telco? Then you identify, for example, you can use, for example, advanced persistent threat reports, be able to understand previous reports of known intrusions for that particular sector. Then you can be able to even see who was behind it. Then if you have access, for example, to APT reports, both public or even the commercial ones, you can even be able to look at the APT threat actors or APT groups that targeted that particular industry. You can even be able to drill down into your region, into your country. Then based on MITRE, for example, you can be able to use the APT reports, the details within it. Then you can be able to map it to, you can be able to look at the MITRE attack framework, and then you can be able to understand based on the tactics, techniques, and procedures that were used for these previous intrusions, which other threat actors can actually target you. Then based on this information, you can now be able to start thinking out of the box. Because maybe you have the best security controls in place. But if I was a threat actor, one of the avenues I will go through the weakest point. Maybe you have some trust between you, maybe with a third party, can be your partner, it can be a consultant. So if they don't have the necessary controls in place, you can exploit that and use that to as your pivot to get into the environment. So supply chain attacks. So you need also to be able to be very creative in terms of looking at all these possibilities. And then once you understand all this, you can be able, now based with this understanding, now you can be able to understand exactly what are your threat intelligence requirements, and then what are some of the sources that you can be able to use. So to summarize this, let me just show you APT, because I know I did not show you initially what APTs are. So advanced persistent threat reporting. So you can quickly get into this. Sorry, let me just, so someone might ask, what's the difference between this and what is here and what we have on the secure list? Generally, what will be the difference will be that, for example, we might have some ongoing investigations, maybe for breaches, and maybe even we can have some investigations ongoing, and we are working with law enforcement. So for such reasons, you can find that that information around that particular advanced persistent threat, that particular incident, is not yet public. But definitely, if you are on this this commercial version of this advanced persistent threat reporting, you'll be able to see all that. So like I said here, quickly, you can be able to search. So you can be able to search basically anything that you want. So you can be able to search your region, your country. So here it's more of the reports. We want to see what the reports have. So for example, here, let me just see. Okay, I'll just use this one. It's outdated, but definitely I was not going to show you the latest ones because it's commercial. So here, you can have an executive summary. So like we said, we want something strategic. So this one should be it should be easy for even the non-technical staff to understand and be able to make decisions based on that. So let's see what this entails. So there's that one, activity report. So here we can be able to see the details around, for example, a particular incident that happened. We can be able to see the details around it. Any additional resources around it will be also available. I think this one is not showing you it's not showing me what I need you to see. Let's get another one. Okay, I'll use this one. I'm sure it has a bit more details. So for example, this one, this is the APT actor. Definitely I'm using something outdated. Definitely we also have the latest ones for the different regions. So you can see a quick summary in terms of that particular threat actor. So if it's an APT actor that we have been tracking, that information will be there. We can also be able to see a quick summary, the main exploits that they are targeting. So you can see, very easy to consume. Definitely there are others that have more details. But basically this one, like we said, for threat actors, we want to understand where they're operating from, what are those external factors that are influencing them, and then the details around that. So if we were to go into the details, I would assume it should be this next one. Let me see. Sorry, this is actually still, let's see. Okay, again, now here we can be able to get something more detailed. So this one, the audience will be the technical team. So if there are MD5s, their URLs, all those details around that particular attack, how exactly they're executing it, the targets. So you can see already, based on this report, you can be able to do one that really relates to your industry. Then when you're doing that threat profiling, you can even be able to look at all the threats that have affected your industry, the main actors there, and then you can be able to use this to be able to decide on possible intrusions that can be attempted, and then you can be able to prevent those. So all the details, the indicators will be here that you can be able to consume. If there are any IOAs, we have indicators of attack, and we have the tools, tactics, and procedures around that. You'll also be able to see all that. So very detailed report. You can see, all the details around it. If there is, let's say, related email addresses, related domains, all that information will be there. And then, so easily you can be able to see that if this relates to you, relates to your industry, these are things that you'll want to start checking for based on what is happening on your network. You can see for some of let's see. I want to see if there's any that has the IOCs here. Okay, let's use this one. Let's just do this for purposes of a bit more content. So I think basically in summary, you can be able to see what we're able to achieve. We have lots of information. We have both strategic, technical information. Within the reports, you can be able to get the details around that particular threat, and you can be able to apply this directly. Threat data feeds that I talked about, you can see there are different categories, malicious. You can be able to automatically ingest this into your security controls, into your SIEM. You can see they are frequently being updated. So definitely, there's a lot in terms of threat intelligence. And I generally hope I've been able to convince you why threat intelligence is important. I've been able to show you the different sources available. We have been able to see some use cases for that. And I hope you'll be able to make use of that information to improve the cybersecurity posture of yourself or even the organization you work for. So thank you. Those are the details. If you need to contact me, if you want to have further discussions around this topic, around application, you can reach me through any of these avenues. That's it from me for today. Thank you. I think I did spend more than the 1 hour I intended, but I hope there was a lot of value. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Moses. That's what happens when you give somebody with 10 years experience. There's a lot to share. So just to wind up, there are several questions that maybe we can quickly pass through that I know you have answered some. And there's Meshach who is asking quickly that what's your take on the Russian connection, seeing that a great percentage of hackers are Russian? Moses, are you there? Okay. You have muted yourself, Moses. Okay, Moses seems to have trouble with his sound. Okay, so what we'll do, oh, there you are.
Please, sorry, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So there's a lot of geopolitics in terms of everything around cybersecurity. I think generally, if you look, as Kaspersky, we are Russian, we are fairly the outsiders in terms of if you look at the tech vendors. Definitely, we have seen a lot of groups that are related to Russia, either forming part of the most aggressive advanced persistent threat groups and the likes. But that's both a good and a bad thing. So it's good because at the end of the day they're being creative and they are forcing everyone to be able to improve their defenses. It's a bad thing because ideally at times, based on the geopolitical situation, they might try to tie it back to, for example, tech vendors that are from that particular region. But as Kaspersky, our main aim is just to provide cyber immunity. So irrespective of where the threat is coming from, we are able to provide the protections that keep our customers, immune to the various threats. So I think I'll just keep it at that. Then also maybe another good thing will be when it comes to cybersecurity, another aspect that is coming up a lot will be transparency. So people want something that is a bit more transparent. So what kind of data are you gathering from your customers? How are you processing the data? How are you storing the data? And definitely, we've been able to do a good job around that particular aspect, even based on different governments, different organizations. We can even build data centers, understand the source code, be able to see the source code, be able to see how we process all this, and then around that political situation.
Okay, let's just do the last question and close the session. So Henry is asking, what are the Kaspersky solutions for spoofing and phishing that you might offer with the issue of attackers using their own their own mail user agents?
Okay, so what I can quickly summarize, Kaspersky is more than endpoint. This is a quick slide, basically on everything. I talked about the 3 stages, how we categorize overall threats, and I think this one will be able to address. So if you see the main vectors of attack, we are addressing them, endpoint, cloud security, under mail traffic, definitely, we have something. So if it's security for Office 365, security, if you want something standalone, if you want something that directly integrates with Microsoft Exchange, we have all that. So feel free to reach out. As part of my role, definitely it's more of understanding the requirements. If you need us to do a presentation, a demo, a proof of value for you before you buy, that's basically what my role entails.
There's another one asking, what is the DNS solution offered by Kaspersky?
Okay, I think I should be on. I'm no longer muted, right?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes. So DNS, we can work around network traffic. So we can be able to. We have something around security for internet gateway. So we can be able to sit at the network level, understand what people are trying to access. So we can even restrict based on the organization policies what people should be able to access. So definitely DNS will be a component of this, because for you to access any public resource, it's either you are using the domain, the URL, or if you are tech savvy enough, you have the public IP. So as long as we are starting from the DNS to convert the domain to the public IP, all that we'll be able to see, and then we can be able to enforce it. Because as part of the threat data feeds, you saw there's a lot around IP addresses, malicious URLs, and even there's a section for DNS related entries. So we can be able to address that. And also, you see, for some of the other solutions, we want to understand what is happening on the endpoint, what is happening on mail, on network, and we want to correlate all that. And then based on that, we can be able to offer you something like XDR. So also we have that capability. So there are a lot of options just based on. So basically what I look for will be the maturity of the customer. So we look at the customer, the resources they have, the skills that they have, the infrastructure that they have, and then based on that, we can be able to understand, where they lie in terms of cybersecurity maturity and what solution will be most applicable to them based on their maturity.
Okay, thank you so much, Moses. And Mugoty, I have shared our link to the Telegram group. You're asking more of a mentorship question, and because of time, we'll continue our conversation there. So kindly join Karibu Sana to the community session. And I'd like to give back the mic to Maria to close it. So thank you, everyone. My name is Stella. It was a pleasure meeting everyone today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for your attendance, and thank you all for making it throughout the entire session. I'd like to thank Moses. It was a very detailed presentation. We've really learned a lot from beginning to end about your products and the different strategies and terminologies. So I'd like to wish everyone a good night. If you have any questions, you're always free to tweet and reach out to the speaker on his socials, as he has mentioned. So I'd like to close the session by saying good night and thank you again for attending.
Good night.
Good night.